Have you ever just, stopped and considered that the greatest mysteries of our ancient world might all be connected? Things like the Great Pyramids at Giza with their impossible mathematics,
Yeah.
and, say, the deepest beliefs of the earliest Christian sects.
And that they might be linked by some kind of invisible, unified philosophy.
Yes. And what if the key to unlocking that whole massive interconnected truth lies in something as, well, as simple as a single number that just keeps showing up?
That underlying coherence is exactly what we're going to explore in this deep dive.
And they really challenge our modern ideas, don't they? This whole assumption of religious originality or, frankly, our own scientific superiority.
They absolutely do. What these texts really provide is a kind of blueprint. They illustrate these hidden correspondences between cultures that we always treat as totally separate. Well, whether we're talking about Zoroastrian priests in ancient Persia, the Jewish tradition of Kabbalah, Greek philosophers like Pythagoras, or the Egyptian master builders, the people who built monuments that still, to this day, defy modern engineering.
So our mission here is to give you, our listener, the ultimate shortcut. We want to move past the surface level stuff.
Right. Not just the shared flood myths or similar moral codes.
Exactly. We want to get into the deep philosophical structure that dictates why these systems look the same. We're going to be looking at the incredible spiritual and social power of the number 7.
And the surprising, almost hidden relationship between early Christianity and the mystery cult of Mithras in Rome.
And, maybe most critically, how the architectural wonders of the ancient world are, in fact, physical, geometric expressions of a single, universal human journey toward knowledge, towards illumination.
This isn't just religious history. I mean, it's so much more than that. It's the history of the human spirit itself,
Yeah.
constantly being refined and repeated across different cultures and thousands of years.
The sources seem to suggest the ancients weren't just, guessing about the cosmos.
Far from it. They seem to have possessed an understanding of the structure of the universe and of the human soul that was so accurate they encoded it directly into their beliefs and, crucially, into their physical monuments.
Like a language of unity.
It is, and to start to decode that language, we have to begin with the one constant that just leaps out from every single source we have.
Okay, let's unpack this constant, the number 7. Looking through all of these materials, its sheer ubiquity is just... it's mind-boggling.
It really is.
It seems to pop up with such consistency across every single tradition we're looking at, from east to west. We need to go beyond just listing where it appears and really ask the question, why? Why this specific number? Why was it given such immense universal spiritual weight?
Well, the prevalence of 7 is, it's anything but accidental. It's foundational.
Yeah.
In esoteric philosophy, the number 7 signifies completeness.
Completely.
Yes, and the point of initiation, or cyclical transition, because it's the sum of 3 and 4.
Okay, break that down. 3 and 4.
3 represents the spiritual realm. Think of the Trinity, the 3 aspects of the divine, and 4 represents the material realm, the 4 elements, the 4 corners of the earth, the 4 seasons.
So spiritual plus material.
Exactly. 7, therefore, represents the synthesis of the spiritual with the material. It's the divine realized in a physical form.
That structural definition alone immediately provides context for its heavy use in Western religious systems. I mean, let's start with the biblical and Christian context, where it feels less like symbolism and more like the actual operating system of their cosmology.
The book of Revelation is the prime example of its function as a structural marker. I mean, the entire text is organized and driven by 7s.
Right, you have the 7 seals.
The 7 seals that are broken, the 7 angels and their trumpets, the 7 last plagues, the 7 golden bowls.
The list just keeps going.
It does. 7 thunders, 7 horns and eyes, 7 diadems, and 7 kings. This repetition isn't just for effect. It establishes the final, complete cycle of prophecy. It's the number of finality.
And outside of that, that really dense apocalyptic literature, 7 structures, the very moral framework of the faith. That's probably where most of us interact with it.
Precisely. We have that well-known duality designed to define the human spiritual struggle. The 7 deadly sins.
Lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride.
And they stand in direct opposition to the 7 virtues.
Chastity, temperance, charity, diligence, kindness, patience, and humility.
The entire path to salvation is framed as a conscious effort to transmute that sin into its corresponding virtue. It's a 7-step process of refinement.
And this extends beyond just moral lists, right? It gets baked into the very structure of theology and literature.
Absolutely. Think about Dante's Divine Comedy. Mount Purgatory, which represents the soul's ascent and purification, well, it's divided into 7 levels.
One for each deadly sin.
Exactly. Each one is dedicated to purifying the soul of that specific sin. It's literally an architectural rendering of this 7-fold spiritual journey.
It's a map.
It's a map. And what's more, the sources note the specificity in the Gospel of Luke. It genealogically places Jesus as the 77th generation in a direct line back to Adam.
The 77th. So a dual 7.
Yes, it's essentially emphasizing ultimate perfection and spiritual completion, a double dose of that divine synthesis.
What I find so fascinating here is how quickly the sources reveal these astonishing parallels in Eastern and Abrahamic traditions that were running at the same time, or in some cases clearly came before this Christian usage.
The unity is undeniable. It suggests a shared ancient source for this cosmology.
So where else does it appear?
In Judaism, you have Shiva. The number 7 dictates the sacred number of days of mourning, the custom we know as sitting Shiva. It signifies the completion of that immediate cycle of grief.
Okay, and in Islam?
In the foundational texts of Islam, the Fatiha, which is the opening prayer of the Quran, contains 7 verses. This numerical consistency isn't arbitrary. It's reflecting a cosmic structure.
And if we look at the Islamic cosmological view, 7 is used to define, well, reality itself, right? Space.
Exactly. Islam holds the belief in 7 gates of hell, which categorize the different forms of torment. And the sources even name 7 distinct hells: Gehenna, Ladha, Hatorna, Ser, Sakar, Jahim, and Hoyat.
And that's balanced, isn't it?
Crucially, yes. It's balanced by the statement in the Quran that Allah created 7 skies and just as many lands. So it establishes this complete vertical and horizontal structure for the entire universe. The concept is one of a layered, structured reality, all defined by 7 spheres of influence or experience.
Which sounds incredibly similar to the Hindu model. It also maps the universe onto 7 spheres or layers.
It does. Hinduism speaks of 7 worlds in the universe, the lokas, 7 seas, and the 7 great gurus, the Saptarishis. And of course, the widely known model of the 7 chakras spanning the subtle body aligns perfectly with this. It maps specific energy centers to stages of spiritual refinement.
From the root to the crown.
A 7-step journey. And we even see echoes of this so far afield. I mean, the ancient Mayas referred to their great god of the sky as God 7. He was surrounded by 6 suns, and they considered their 7th day a lucky day. The consistency is truly global.
So now we have to move to the core of this ancient mystical connection, which brings us directly to the mystery cults and the esoteric traditions. This is where the number 7 isn't just structural, it's a map of initiation.
The Persian cult of Mithra, which was absolutely central to Roman life for centuries before Christianity took hold, gives us perhaps the clearest model. Its entire spiritual process was built on the number 7.
How?
An initiate had to progress through 7 distinct grades, or levels of consciousness. They were Corax, the raven, Nymphus, the bridegroom, Miles, the soldier, Leo, the lion, Perses, the Persian, Heliodromus, the courier of the sun, and finally, Pater, the father.
But it's not just a list of titles, is it? What do those grades functionally represent? It can't just be like moving up ranks in the military.
No, not at all. They represent an ascent through the 7 classical planetary spheres, a concept that was deeply ingrained in Mesopotamian and Hellenistic cosmology. Each grade was symbolically protected by a specific planet.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The lion, or Leo, was associated with Jupiter and the element of fire. It represented the solar stage of the initiate's purification. This was a critical step. The ceremonial scale that was used in the Mithraic temples, the Mithraea, had 7 levels.
Let me guess, 1 for each grade.
1 for each grade, and each was made from a different metal.
Ah, now we're getting into alchemy.
Precisely. You have lead, tin, bronze, iron, electrum, silver, and gold. This perfectly mirrors the 7 planetary spheres and the alchemical ascent from base matter, which is lead associated with Saturn, to spiritual gold associated with the sun.
So 7 wasn't just a count, it was a physical and metaphysical map of spiritual progress. It was a functional ladder you had to climb.
Exactly. And this philosophical blueprint is reinforced again and again in Hermetic and Rosicrucian doctrines. We talk about the 7 stages of creation, the 7 Hermetic Principles,
Mentalism, correspondence, vibration.
polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. And you have the 7 archangels corresponding to the 7 classical planets and the 7 days of the week. This reveals a tightly constructed cosmological system where the macrocosm, the universe, is mirrored in the microcosm.
The human soul.
The human soul. If the universe is sevenfold, then the human soul must also be sevenfold to be able to connect with it.
That's a powerful idea.
It's the core Rosicrucian concept referenced in the sources. The human soul is sevenfold in its manifestation, yet it's utterly one in its divine essence.
And this gives us those models of the subtle body, right?
Yes, the physical body, connected to the earth or Saturn, the vital body, the astral body, the mental body, the causal body, the Buddhic body, and finally the atmic body, which connects to the divine. The entire journey of initiation is simply about reawakening and unifying these 7 principles within yourself.
And that concept is even represented geometrically, isn't it?
By the 7 circles that form the seed of life in sacred geometry. This pattern corresponds directly to the 7 days of creation, illustrating that the very structure of generation and manifestation unfolds in this 7-fold pattern.
So the message is that the path from base matter to divine understanding is a journey of 7 distinct, necessary transformations.
It is, and this numerical constant, this map, serves as our bridge into the next section, seeing how this structure actually played out in the real world in the crucible of ancient Rome.
The structural unity, built around the number 7, provides a perfect thematic lens for this next section. Because here is where the historical crossover gets really, really interesting. We're focusing on that period in Rome where the mystery cult of Mithras was, you could argue, Christianity's most direct and formidable rival.
Oh, the competition was incredibly intense. Mithraism was immensely popular. It flourished particularly among the Roman military, but also with bureaucrats and merchants from roughly the 1st to the 4th centuries CE.
So it wasn't some fringe cult.
Not at all. Its widespread appeal, spanning the entire empire, made its philosophical overlap with early Christianity a major historical dilemma for later theologians.
Okay, so let's detail the core Mithraic doctrine and its central imagery. Where did Mithras even come from within that broader Persian tradition?
Mithras was revered as the son of Ahura Mazda, the great Zoroastrian creator, spirit of light and good. The central defining image of the cult, the one found in every single temple, was the Tauroctony.
The Tauroctony, that's Mithras slaying the sacred bull, right?
Yes. And the sources stress that the bull symbolizes life. The Persian word for bull is often associated with life force. This entire cosmic scene, this sacrifice, likely dates back at least 3,000 years before the Christian era.
3,000 years.
It possibly references an astrological age when the sun was in the sign of the bull, Taurus, at the vernal equinox. It's an astronomical key.
And the myth itself involves a world-saving sacrifice that results in creation and fertility. It sounds familiar.
It's very familiar. Ahura Mazda instructed Mithras to perform this deed. Mithras slew the bull, and from this sacrificial act, new life spilled forth, animals, useful plants, all of creation. This motif of a divine birth, a necessary sacrifice, and the subsequent salvation of the world. It certainly carries echoes that would have resonated deeply within the Roman spiritual climate.
And the narrative specifics were also striking.
Very. The sources detail Mithras' birth in a grotto or a cave, and his first attendants were shepherds.
Shepherds. A cave. Okay. This is striking, and historically this explains why the standard interpretation often frames this period as some kind of epic competition where Christianity ultimately triumphs over its pagan rival.
The traditional reading is one of conquest, yes. But our sources really advocate for a much more profound cultural and spiritual synthesis. The overlaps are just too deliberate to ignore.
Beyond the birth narratives, what else?
Well, consider the shared dates. December 25th was an incredibly powerful solstice celebration. It marked the birth of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, a deity that was heavily associated with Mithras.
And later, the birth of Christ.
Early Christian figures, knowing how difficult it would be to convert pagan populations, actively merged these beliefs. Constantine, for example, made Sunday a mandatory holy day, explicitly aligning the new faith with long-established traditions of sun worship. It was a strategic move.
But I have to push back a little here. Based on what we discussed before, doesn't the sheer popularity of Mithraism and all these structural similarities just suggest that Christianity was, a very effective PR campaign that just packaged similar ideas under a more human figure? That Mithras was mystical and Christ was historical.
That is the pivotal scholarly distinction, and it's a very important one. Scholars consistently emphasize that Jesus Christ was a living, suffering human who existed in history. This anchors Christianity squarely within the Judeo-Christian tradition of revelation and, well, historical proof.
Whereas
Mithras, conversely, was a mythical god. He was rooted entirely in a long tradition of legend, allegorical ritual, and secret experience. Mithraism required an initiate to participate in a secret Mithraeum, a physical cave, a symbolic microcosm to gain knowledge.
So the fundamental difference isn't the ideas themselves, but the delivery system, open history versus secret initiation.
Precisely. The Mithraeum was usually designed to be underground, to mimic the cave of Mithras's birth. It represented the material world where the bull was slain. The initiation was a symbolic descent and then an ascent, mirroring the soul's journey and the planetary cycles we just discussed.
But Christianity offered something different.
It offered a public, textual revelation that could transcend regional boundaries. It appealed to everyone, not just the initiates who were accepted into the secret rites.
That makes the ultimate religious history in Rome less about a conquest then, and more about finding a permanent, universal vehicle for a shared spiritual need.
That's the synthesis the sources point to. The ultimate religious history was a refinement. The Christian founders, recognizing the power and appeal of these mystery schools, were strategically keen to include in their faiths all the sublime values and beautiful ideals appealing to human conscience mind.
So they took what was already working in the Mithraic tradition.
Exactly. The technical similarities in beliefs and practices, from baptism and communion rites to moral imperatives, they reveal an interconnectedness. It's rooted in a shared basic idea of a compassionate, all-powerful cosmic God who offers inner peace and eternal salvation.
It sounds like the human need for divinity spoke louder than the differences in the earthly character of the god. The concept of a savior who sacrifices himself for cosmic order was just the best framework for communicating profound spiritual truth at that particular time.
It was the universal spiritual language of the era, and Christianity successfully channeled this common human spiritual need into a system that was scalable, textual, and universally accessible. That's what ensured its survival over the localized secret structure of the Mithraic cults.
Which brings us to the next logical step. Exploring what exactly that sacrifice symbolized philosophically, moving beyond just the historical context. So, if both Mithraism and Christianity were tapping this unified human need for a saving deity who undergoes a sacrifice, we have to explore what that underlying philosophy of death and resurrection actually meant to the ancients. It wasn't just about saving your soul after you physically die in the future, was it? It was about something happening now in life.
That is the essential insight. The sacrifices of the dying gods, whether we're talking about Dionysus, Osiris, Persephone, or Attis, they weren't literal primitive imaginings. They were highly structured philosophical allegories.
Allegories for what?
Illustrating the required spiritual transformation for elevation from the material, fallen state. The death wasn't physical mortality, it was a symbolic death of the lower animal self.
Let's start with the mystery schools that codified this knowledge, like the famous lesser and greater rites at Eleusis in Greece. They were all about this, right?
They were. The rites centered on the myth of Persephone, who was abducted by Hades or Pluto into the underworld. This myth mirrors the essential cycle of existence: birth, life, death, and of course, the changing of the seasons.
Right, Persephone returns to the surface world after eating pomegranate seeds.
Exactly. It symbolizes her necessary period of darkness and her eventual return to the light. The rites weren't designed just to observe this cycle, but to prepare the initiate for his own transition through it. They were preserving the scientific understanding of cyclical existence as deep spiritual philosophy.
And the Egyptian myth of Osiris provides an even more dramatic allegory for overcoming this materiality.
Osiris is often seen as the green man, the god of agriculture and the deceased. He suffers dismemberment at the hands of his brother, Set, only to be resurrected by the wisdom of Isis and Thoth.
The dismemberment is such a powerful image.
It's a profound symbol. It represents the fragmentation and sinking of the pure, higher self into the lower, restricted state of materiality. His resurrection, through the combined forces of maternal love from Isis and wisdom from Thoth, symbolizes the movement back to a unified spiritual knowledge.
So the ultimate goal, the alchemical process, if you will, was this concept the sources keep calling living resurrection.
Exactly. The ultimate aim of the mysteries and the alchemists was not achieving mere corporeal immortality or extending physical life indefinitely. It was about elevating the lower self, the animal nature, through the acquisition of knowledge and wisdom.
There's a powerful quote in the sources about this.
There is. To extend life in the physical is to extend death of the spiritual. The physical body is viewed as the temporary tomb of the spiritual or higher self, which remains asleep or dead until it's consciously reawakened through illumination.
That reframes the initiation rituals completely. They weren't just symbolic tests or hazing rituals. They were meant to physically and psychologically embody this process of overcoming the material state.
That's why they were so intense. Initiates underwent a symbolic death and rebirth. We see this in the narratives, like Lazarus being called from the tomb, or Pythagoras, who allegedly spent years in symbolic seclusion only to emerge transformed.
And in the Egyptian pyramid mysteries, this was literal, wasn't it?
It was. The neophyte would literally be placed in the sarcophagus in the king's chamber, undergo intense psychological trials in the darkness, and then be symbolically resurrected, sometimes raised by the priest, using what was known as the lion's paw grip.
That lion's paw grip is intriguing. What's the significance of the lion in this context?
The lion is a solar symbol. It's linked to the sun and the astrological sign of Leo, representing the illuminated, purified, and ruling aspect of consciousness.
So the initiation was literally a transition from the darkness of the tomb,
which is ignorance in matter,
into the light of the sun,
which is wisdom and spirit. To be raised by the lion's paw is to be raised into the light, to be reborn as an illuminated being, a son of God.
This brings us directly to the most powerful and, I think, often misunderstood symbol of suffering and redemption in the West, the cross. If all these dying gods are allegories, what does the cross represent philosophically?
The crucifixion of Jesus on the cross is a universal symbol. It represents the suffering of all humans who are crucified to matter by illusion.
Crucified to matter.
Philosophically, the cross itself represents the four corners of the material world and the four cardinal directions. By extension, it's the four elements, earth, air, fire, water, that compose the physical body. To be crucified is to be confined within the bounds of material existence, trapped by the five senses.
And the fall of man is the precise description of this process of sinking into matter.
Exactly. The initial fall was the sinking of the higher unified self into the lower spheres. It's what dragged us into the underworld of desire, just like Persephone.
So desire is hell.
In this philosophical sense, yes. Desire, or the endless pursuit of gratification tied to the lower self, is defined as truly being hell. The continuous internal striving to conquer this animal nature and material impulse is the eternal battle. And it's allegorized globally as slaying the dragon or the beast.
The dragon guards the gold.
The dragon doesn't just represent sin, it guards the store of gold, which is the wisdom you can only acquire by conquering that lower animal self.
Okay, finally, let's tie this quest for unifying wisdom back to the concept of the logos. The source material suggests a mistranslation here, fundamentally fractured Western understanding.
This is absolutely critical. The Greek word logos was mistranslated, most famously in the King James Bible, simply as the word.
And that obscured its real meaning.
Its profound philosophical meaning, yes. For the Stoics, logos was the uncreated cosmic principle of reason and order that pervades all things. It is the structured knowledge, the divine blueprint that organizes the entire universe. The ancients understood the world intuitively, but once that intuition was lost, the logos, as structured, accessible knowledge, became the necessary pathway back to truth.
So saying in the beginning was the word makes it sound like a decree, like someone just spoke.
Yeah.
But understanding it as in the beginning was cosmic reason and order makes it a statement about the inherent intelligent structure of reality itself.
Precisely. The Egyptian hieroglyphics tell us that the word, the logos, creates all things. It is the acting intellect of the Father, the image of God that structures everything we experience. If we don't understand the world intuitively, then logos, as philosophy, mathematics, and structured knowledge, becomes our external savior.
It's the key.
This intellectual key, the knowledge of cosmic order, is what the ancients sought to preserve. And they preserved it not only in their myths, but in unmoving, massive stone.
The esoteric philosophy gives us the blueprint, the cycles of 7, the journey of resurrection. So now we pivot to the physical evidence in Section 4. The massive structures that didn't just house these mysteries, but actually encoded this secret, seemingly impossible knowledge into their very geometry.
The monumental architecture, particularly the Great Pyramid of Giza, is astounding, not just for its engineering, which is incredible, but for the depth of astronomical and geometric knowledge it embodies.
These structures were never simple tombs.
Never. They functioned as physical maps of the cosmos and, more importantly, of the human soul's journey of initiation.
Okay, let's nail down the specifics of this impossible knowledge. We know it incorporates pi and phi, the golden ratio, but what are the structural details that prove it was a temple of transfiguration, not just a burial site for a pharaoh?
The pyramid's entire construction acts as a scale model of the Earth itself, but it's on a very precise scale of 1 to 43,200.
Wait, 1 to 43,200? That's incredibly specific. Why that number?
That number, 43,200, is intensely sacred. It relates directly to the Great Year, the cycle of the precession of the equinoxes, which is about 25,920 years. If you multiply 43,200 by 360 the degrees in a circle, you get the number of years in 2 precessional cycles. The ancients were literally using the pyramid to map cosmic time.
So the dimensions of the pyramid are a miniaturized map of the Earth's orbit and celestial timing. Okay, give us the mathematical proof for that.
The sources are very specific. The Earth's equatorial circumference, when you scale it down by 43,200 times, measures approximately 3,043.39 feet.
And the pyramid's base?
The measured perimeter base of the pyramid is 3,023.16 feet. The margin of error is virtually negligible for a structure of that size and age.
That's unbelievable.
It doesn't stop there. The ratio of the pyramid's height to twice the length of its base side is the ratio of pi. And internally, the dimensions of the king's chamber incorporate the golden ratio, phi, a constant found throughout nature. This level of integrated knowledge was, according to our established chronology, entirely beyond the capability of dynastic Egypt.
And the purpose of the king's chamber wasn't burial then, but transformation.
It was a crucible for initiation. It was precisely built not to hold a corpse, but to amplify sounds and specific vibrational frequencies within the chamber.
This explains those anecdotes, like the one about Napoleon.
Exactly. Napoleon Bonaparte, who insisted on spending the night there, he emerged visibly shaken and refused to speak of the experience, except to say that if he did, no one would believe him. The space was designed to alter consciousness and facilitate that symbolic death and resurrection of the neophyte, enabling them to become an immortal being or a son of God.
The timeline of the pyramid and its associated structures, particularly the Sphinx, is equally provocative. It challenges our entire understanding of ancient history.
The Sphinx is the sentinel of this ancient wisdom. It gazes due east, directly toward the equinoctial sunrise. It's a testament to its role in astronomical observation and the cycles of creation. But the crucial evidence relates to its geological age.
This is the water erosion theory.
Yes. Researchers like John Anthony West and geologist Robert Schoch noted extensive vertical erosion patterns on the Giza monuments, particularly on the enclosure of the Sphinx.
And those vertical patterns are crucial because they suggest water weathering, not the wind and sand erosion you'd expect in a desert.
Precisely. To cause that degree of vertical weathering, you would need massive, sustained periods of heavy rainfall. And those kinds of conditions ended in Egypt closer to the end of the last ice age.
So what does that mean for its age?
This physical evidence suggests the Sphinx predates dynastic Egyptian civilization, potentially being older than 10,000 BC, maybe even older than 15,000 BC. If that's true, our entire established chronology of human civilization, based on this idea of linear progression, is deeply flawed.
The sources also suggest that architecture preserved the feminine principle in sacred space. How so?
Absolutely. Ancient temples often embody the divine feminine, symbolically representing the womb or the vessel of creation. Structures like Menadra on Malta, which are dated even older than the pyramids, and even specific design elements of later structures, like the entrance arches of Notre Dame Cathedral, share these elements, domed roofs and oval Ionic entrances.
And what's the connection to the beehive?
The domed, rounded architecture also mimics the beehive. The beehive is a symbol of insight, harmony, industry, and the natural order of creation.
The geometry of the honeycomb.
Perfect geometry, reflecting the inherent order of the logos in nature. And in ancient Greece, priestesses were called the Melissa, which means bees. They were crucial figures who taught civilization and assisted initiates in the process of living resurrection within special sacred chambers.
Finally, these architectural secrets are fundamentally linked to the global disaster myths, the great floods that necessitated these civilizing gods to restart knowledge after a massive reset.
The striking similarity of global flood myths is impossible to ignore. Noah, Deucalion, and Pyrrha floating in a chest in the Greek myth, the Mesopotamian story of Utnapishtim, Ziusudra, even Hopi legends. They all point powerfully to a common cataclysmic source, a period of massive geological trauma, whether from water, ice, or fire. The destruction of one age always coincided with the rise of civilization in the next.
And who arrives after the cataclysm?
The civilizing gods. Figures like Osiris in Egypt, Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent who arrived in Central America in a book from the East, and Viracocha in the Andes. They all emerged from the water or arrived immediately after the waters receded to restart civilization. They brought agriculture, law, mathematics.
This is the first time.
This period is what the Egyptians called Zep-Tepi, the first time. The architecture preserves the knowledge of that preceding age, ensuring the new cycle, which is often ushered in by acts like Mithra slaying the bull, does not lose the geometry of the divine plan.
This entire deep dive has systematically, it's just dismantled our modern assumption of historical superiority. We tend to dismiss these ancient philosophies, their rituals, their deep knowledge as just superstition, yet the geometric, astronomical, and philosophical knowledge embedded in their architecture seems impossible for so-called primitives.
Yeah.
We have to address the definition of magic as it was understood by the Magi.
Magic, in the context of the ancient Magi and esoteric philosophy, has nothing to do with conjuring illusions or breaking natural laws. Not in the way we think of it today.
So what is it?
It is the utilization and directing of what they called the astral light. This is a universal energy or a fundamental force that pervades all reality. And magic is directing it through focused intention and trained will.
So it's basically a form of advanced science.
It is fundamentally a form of advanced scientific observation and experimentation upon the natural world. It's only misinterpreted as supernatural by the ignorant observer who lacks the philosophical key to understand what they're seeing.
That perfectly aligns with that famous quote we often reference, which becomes literal truth in this context. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
The ancients understood this energy source. They were the ones who sought control over this force, the astral light. The entire goal of the Magi was to subject the astral light to one's own sovereignty through a supreme act of trained will.
And they understood that true power comes not from fighting nature,
but from realizing that opposing the current of nature does no good. The initiate seeks liberation from sensory illusions to master these elements by working with nature, based on her underlying laws, not by demanding nature bend to their will, which is the hallmark of modern technological materialism.
The source material connects the attainment of this mastery directly to the disciplined regulation of the body and mind, which, seems so archaic to our pill-popping, instant gratification society.
It is the ultimate self-refinement. Philosophical wisdom was always attained through strict disciplines like vegetarianism, rigorous regulation of sleep patterns, and physical abstinence. This was practiced by figures like Pythagoras and the Indian rishis.
And these weren't just random ascetic practices?
No, they were methods designed to keep the body in a healthful, temperate state, free from gross humors and excesses. By doing so, they made the subtle body, that sevenfold soul we talked about, qualified for receiving spiritual illumination.
And the reason we are so blind to this ancient science is because our modern brains are only capable of perceiving a tiny fraction of reality anyway, right?
That is the tragic, self-imposed limitation. The sources strongly suggest that what we call reality is both matter and mind, yet the physical brain decodes only a tiny fraction of the visible world.
How small a fraction?
Conservative estimates place the fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum we perceive between 0.0005% and 0.5% of all that exists in the universe. If we only experience one side of a cosmic equation, how can we possibly claim to have mastered it?
That puts our modern superiority complex into stark perspective. We think we've mastered reality through our technology, but we're only perceiving a sliver of it through a highly conditioned physical filter.
Modernity's deep-seated flaw is that superiority complex, coupled with a fundamental philosophical misunderstanding. We abuse nature and her laws, constantly seeking external salvation, be it through materialism, political systems, or some future technological singularity, instead of developing the internal self through the necessary spiritual death and rebirth required for illumination.
That reliance on material means for external saving.
It is precisely the core deceit of the mythological trickster, convincing us the answers are outside, not inside.
And this modern flaw is mirrored by the destructive dangers of literalism in the ancient traditions themselves. It's not just a modern problem.
Absolutely. Mythology should not be summarily denounced as heresy by either religious dogma, which is literalism, or scientific dogma, which is materialism. Both of them rely on a form of baseless faith.
Literalism reads the letter, but misses the spirit.
Entirely. The material descriptions of heaven, the pearly gates and golden streets, are not blueprints for a city in the clouds. They are metaphors for the spiritual self, transmuted from base matter or animal consciousness through a process of spiritual alchemy.
So to reduce the logos, the infinite cosmic reason, to a singular anthropomorphic character is to commit a form of blasphemy against the true scope of the divine.
That is exactly the teaching of many of these ancient philosophies. The truth is found in the spirit, in the underlying principles of structure, like the number 7 or sacred geometry, not in the external material letter. The ancients understood that the universe operated by intelligent law, and their myths and their architecture were designed to teach that law, leading the seeker back to the original Zep Tepi the first time before the descent into matter was complete.
So this deep dive has revealed that whether we're examining the quest for the sacred number 7 as the symbol of completeness, the architectural plans of Giza that precisely map the earth and the heavens, the myths of dying gods who promise living resurrection, or the spiritual refinement of Mithraism into early Christianity, they all tell the same unified story.
It is the consistent universal narrative. The necessary descent of the higher self into matter, the struggle against the lower animal nature, the dragon of desire, and the pathway back to eternal consciousness through knowledge, through logos. The grand architect encoded the map to enlightenment not only in the stars and sacred numbers, but within the very essence of human geometry and existence.
And our sources seem to suggest that the trickster has deceived us in two major ways. By making the path to salvation seem entirely external through institutions or technology, and by convincing us that we are merely insignificant life on an insignificant planet.
But if the Great Pyramid is indeed a scale model of our Earth, and by extension our soul, and the goal of initiation is simply to recognize the immortal essence we already possess, then we have to ask ourselves a pretty serious question.
What truth about our inherent connection to cosmic order are we still too afraid to let modern science confirm?
What would happen if we decided to step beyond our current paradigms and revisit those abandoned halls of magnificent philosophic temples?